Hi, Fernando. Welcome to LSAT Unplugged.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining. So I was really interested to speak with you because I noticed that you have a lot going on related to the legal field. And since, of course, I'm working with pre-law students, it seemed a natural fit. So I noticed that you've got I Matter Now, where you're helping attorneys live more, happier, more successful lifestyles and careers. You've got the Attorney Heart podcast, and you've also got something focused on bar exam prep. Can you share a little bit about each of those and how they might be applicable to our listeners?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm excited about just continuing to connect on our respective work and connecting and bridging that. I think the best way to start is just telling you a little bit about why I started I Matter Now. And I Matter Now is really an affirmation that we don't tell ourselves enough. And one of the things that your listeners should know as future law students, as future attorneys, one of the things that happens a lot is in law school, we get told that your grades come first, your classes come first, your readings come first, searching for a job comes first, your applications come first, all of that comes first. When you become an attorney, your cases come first, your filings come first, your appearances in court come first, making sure that you perform to the best of your abilities on behalf of your clients come first. Meeting the requirements of the profession comes first. All of that comes first. At what point do we come in as humans? At what point, right, does the human Fernando come in? And so it really does become about shifting the equation and putting your health and wellness first and leading with that and staying self-aware that, you know what, I need to make sure that as I enter this particular challenging process, I am not going to let go of my health and wellness. And the reason why I became interested in this was because for me, I had a blind spot in relation to my own health. One of the key blind spots for me was emotional health, right? I wasn't very keen. I hadn't developed emotional intelligence. And that's not something that we necessarily talk about in the legal profession. It's not something that we necessarily get into in, even undergrad or law school, or even 7 years into the profession. And I realized that it was something that I really needed to learn to develop, which is something that you can develop. It's a skill that if you don't use, you lose. But the more that you practice it and the more you develop it, the better you become at understanding your particular emotions and in turn, how to manage them within yourself and also how to have better relationships with others, right? And so knowing that I had this particular blind spot really helped me as an attorney. I started to do a lot of research on it. And I basically became my own first client. And I worked really hard on learning these skills, and I implemented them. And I have to tell you, the best years that I had as an attorney, they were when I implemented these skills related to emotional health and emotional intelligence. Because I would go into the courtroom and I was aware that I was stressed. I was aware that I was nervous. But I had developed a more positive dialogue in my own mind. Not one where it's like, oh my gosh, you're so stressed and you're not going to perform well. And everybody's going to, think that you look like a fool, et cetera, et cetera. That was the old thought process versus now it's like, okay, I'm a little stressed. I'm a little nervous. I'm going to engage in a mechanism that's going to allow me to reduce that so that I can perform at the highest levels in front of these three justices that are about to ask me a lot of questions in relation to my appellate case, right? And so I would then breathe, deeply, silently, but it allowed me to calm myself. And, opposing counsel was like literally like his hands were just shaking. And I was just like, boom, very calm, present, focused, ready to go, right? And so these particular skills allow me to go into trial, appellate arguments, allow me to engage in very high-level litigation, trial work, and appellate work. And I maintained a very good sense of health and wellness. And so I didn't want to keep all this to myself, Steve. I wanted to assist other colleagues that I saw were going through just some really stressful times. And I wanted to help them improve how they performed with an increased emphasis on wellness, right? And so it was, there was a lot of iterations, but I really liked, the emphasis of, you don't matter next year, you don't matter next month, you don't matter next week, you don't matter tomorrow, you matter today, you matter now, right? And so for me, it became really important to learn. And, I have in my logo a heart inside our mind, because that was the shift that I had to make. I became, when we study for the LSAT, when we study for our exams in law school, when we study for the bar, right? When we prepare for a trial, it's all very logic based, right? There's a lot of logic involved. I mean, you know this from LSAT prep, but that reasoning is very, very, very highly emphasized in the legal profession. And that ends up turning off our heart. And as a result, we don't really harness enough of the power of our heart to really be able to become holistically healthy, holistically well. And then when we do become holistically healthy, you end up becoming much more empowered in whatever it is that you do, because you're taking care of the human you, which then allows you to then become a better attorney, right? And so before, what I was doing, I was leading with the professional identity that I had built for myself, and the human me was getting drowned out. And so I just switched it around. I was like, you know what? Let me take care of the human me. Let me take care of the Fernando as a person, right? Fernando's spirit. And then the attorney just ended up becoming better, because then I would notice, other like my clients getting stressed, right? I would notice, my clients having a tough time right before we'd go into the courtroom. And I was like, hey, how are you? How are you doing? It's okay to feel nervous, right? No shaming, no blaming, no guilty, no like, you can't be nervous right now before you go into it. Like, that's not going to work. You know what I mean? And it's really about that. In a lot of the high performance coaching that I do with my attorney clients, they're trial attorneys, they work in big law firms, they work in nonprofits. I mean, you name it, from all kinds of backgrounds. And what I wanted to do was also create a podcast where I bring in interviews, which you were on, and I'm so glad that you were, because you're also doing some really great work in relation to entering the legal profession, which is really important to put out there, and I love your message, and I wanted to make sure that we learn from each other, and in terms of how are we doing, one, and what are we doing to take care of ourselves or not doing, and so I've gotten to learn a lot from, I've interviewed all attorneys from all kinds of backgrounds, right? But it's definitely a theme that we all experience stress, and it's okay to experience stress, but there's different kinds of stress. There's a kind that gets you through a particular project, short-term project, and you got to study and you got to make it happen. And then, okay, you come off of it. But then there's the long-term, continuous, incessant, chronic stress that can become really unhealthy and counterproductive, you see? And so I ended up creating the podcast for purposes of that. And then I naturally flowed. I mean, I had taken the bar exam back in 2007, and it was the July 2007 bar exam, and I failed it. And I remember when I got the results in November, it was a very dark day for me. It was just, I felt a lot of shame, because I had studied so hard, and I was like, wait a minute, how come I didn't get this? I was studying 10, 11, 12 hours a day. That's what it takes, for like 2.5 months. And I didn't get this. I should have gotten it. And I ended up missing it by like 10 points, So it wasn't even that much. Yeah. It was just like, I don't know. I always had these what ifs, right? But I learned to let those go because I now realize that this was part of my journey, right? But at the time it was challenging, and I had to pick myself back up. I had to rely on the grit that I had used to get through law school, to take the bar exam the first time. I had to make sure that I looked at it as a positive, right? And try to shift my mindset. And so what I had to do was really, I realized I didn't have a game plan. I didn't have a passing mindset. And the exam is really, a lot of it is a mind game, right? When I took it in 2007, it was still 3 days for the California bar exam. Now it's 2 days. And depending on what state, you're in New York, right?
Yeah.
And so it depends. Depending on what state, it could be, just 1 day or day and a half or 2 days or 3 days. So the bar exam back then, it was 3 days here in California. Now it's 2 days. And so I took, 3 full days that first time, and then I had to take another 3 full days of exam. It's intense. And so I told myself, you know what? I've put in a lot of energy. I've put in a lot of effort. I've taken out a good amount of loans. I put in a lot of time. I can't give up now. I can't. I just can't. And I know that I can do it. If I was that close, I need to push through. And even if I hadn't been that close, I don't want to just stop now. I want to continue showing myself that I can. And so I will, and so I must. And so that's the mindset that I had to just shift. Does that make sense?
Totally.
And so the second time around, I created a game plan, and we talked a little bit about it on your episode of Attorney Heart, right? When you came on, when you help folks create a calendar, a day-by-day calendar. And so that's what I did for myself, and then I also had a plan in terms of like, okay, I got to make sure that I take care of me too. Like I can't go out and drink and then feel crappy the next day and not be able to put in a solid day work. So I made sure I started to eat cleaner. I took care of myself, like my health. And also for each part of the exam, right? The 3 parts, I had a plan of attack. I was like, okay, this is how I'm going to attack this. This is how I'm going to attack that. That's how I'm going to attack that. I took it again in February, and in May I got the results and I passed. And I was super happy. My parents and my sister were there with me. And when I clicked it and I saw that this name appears on the pass list, because that's all it says. The previous time it says, this name does not appear on the pass list. And then when you pass, this name appears on the pass list. I was like,
no bells and whistles, no confetti.
No. It's just this name appears, or this name does not appear. And it's like, it's that intense, So when I saw it, I just started crying. I was like super just excited and ready to get into the work that I had been wanting to do as an attorney. Right. And, coming from my background, coming from a low income immigrant background, where there were points in my family's life where we lived paycheck to paycheck, week to week. It was a huge accomplishment. My mom, she was at the time, she was a domestic worker, and my dad worked in construction, and he still works in construction. My mom's, she's a CNA, and we come from a humble background. And so being able to accomplish that goal as the first one in my family, being able to accomplish that goal, for me, it was just huge at the time, and I'm glad I didn't give up. And that's why I decided to start a program focused on making sure that you don't just go into your bar exam studies without having a game plan for every section, that you actually stay, aware of stress is coming up. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? If you don't do anything, what's going to happen is your attention allocation is going to shift, and your body and mind are going to say, oh, you want to keep studying for that? Yeah, good luck with that. I'm going to stay focused on making sure that I give you signs, physical signs, to make sure that you pay attention to me. You know what I mean? And so that is what I work a lot on with my clients. Make sure they have a game plan for it. So I'll stop there because I know I went on.
Wow.
Went
No,
on.
that's an incredible story and an incredible journey. It sounds like you really underwent quite a transformation.
Yeah.
And that transformation, I think, can be really informative and useful to those who are just embarking on this journey now. I think that the work you're doing is so incredibly important, which is why I wanted us to connect and to do this conversation. I think that far too many lawyers, type A, ambitious personalities, that has a good side, but it also has a dark side. And the dark side, I think, as you said, is the lack of self-care. And
Mhm.
people burn the candle at both ends, whether they want to be a corporate attorney or whether they want to do public interest. Either way, it is very easy to get overworked, either because you truly care about your clients or because you want to make partner. Whatever the motivation is, they're all valid, they're all real, and they do have consequences. Unfortunately, we know, I'm sure you know as well as I do, that the attorneys have often high rates of alcoholism or depression or drug abuse, and it's really a travesty in the industry. And I think that your work to show people how to take care of the human side of things, I think it can really help people find more balance, which is
Yeah.
really important for long-term sustainability.
Yeah. And the areas of health, we all have some blind spot, and that's what I learned. One, and then we're all going through something. We are, and so if you start there and just accept the fact that you are not alone, in whatever it is that you're going through, you're not alone. And it's okay to feel fear. It's okay to feel self-doubt. It's okay to feel insecure, but you have to become empowered enough so that you don't allow it to guide what you do or don't do. And what I mean by that is it can be fearful to say, oh, I'm going to sign up for the LSAT. It can be fearful to say, oh, I'm going to apply to law school. It can be fearful to take the bar exam because the potential for failure or potential rejection is there, right? And so those are some of the emotions that we don't like to feel, right? We have fear of failure, and we also don't like to be rejected. Who likes that? But I've learned to listen to and allow my fears to guide me, right? A lot of times I'll feel like, oh, I'm fearful of doing this or launching this or working on this or asking that person to be a guest on here, and self-doubt still comes up for me. But I allow myself to just manage it a lot better. And I listen to it like, okay, why am I fearful about going there? What are the real consequences if I do that? Oh, okay. I might get a no. Oh, that's fine. Life will go on, and there's exercises around that. Like, if I get a no, is that going to matter in 5 minutes? Maybe. How about in 5 hours? Not really. In 5 days? Nope, not at all. In 5 weeks? Nope, not at all. 5 months? Nope. 5 years? Definitely not. It's just a small exercise that you can ask yourself in terms of like, if you are trying to achieve something and then you don't get the result that you want, is it gonna matter in the grand scheme of things, for that long? And even if it does, at least you're striving for something great in your life.
And you have to take risks.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all a risk. I ended up taking the LSAT, if I remember incorrectly, 3 times.
Yeah, that's common. That's common. You're not alone.
Yeah. And, at the time it was definitely challenging for me. And, it was a lot of hard work and, just dedication, commitment, you know what I mean? So I know you do know what I mean, because you dedicated to it for a long time.
Of course, yeah, but I think that it's important that we encourage students to go out there and take risks, because you get inoculated against the failures because they happen so much that you don't even care anymore, right? Like, we might email hundreds of potential guests and only get a small percentage saying yes, or only get responses, but so be it. You go with the ones you have and you move on and up from there. And I also think there's something really important what you said about the fear of failure, being afraid to take chances. But I also think there's a flip side to it, where there's a fear of success, where if I actually got the yes, or if I actually got the score or got the admissions, then I'd have to do this next even bigger thing.
Yeah.
Do bigger things because that's scary and new, right?
Yeah, that's very true. That's definitely a component that does come up for some folks, and I think just being aware, what's your flavor, and then learning to manage it.
Yeah. Yeah. What about in law school? Because we talked about careers and beyond, but even just life in law school, during law school, that can also be a very high stress environment, very competitive, lots of, once again, type A personalities. What's your advice for students entering law school about how to maybe mitigate the stress, find more balance, even from day one of 1L, or even the summer before?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that thousands and thousands of people are going through right now. Right, they're in law school. They're preparing for for their final exams, and or they're applying to jobs, or they're gearing up to finish up law school and then take the bar exam. They're in all different kinds of parts of their journey, and I think for me, one of the things that I love to put out there in terms of guidance is develop the skill of emotional intelligence early on in your law school career. Take time to learn what that skill is. A lot of times people say, "Oh, that's a soft skill," and I started lecturing at Berkeley Law School on that's one of the lessons in the course that I'm teaching there, because it's something that needs to be included in the curriculum, at least in my opinion, in a lot more law schools, right? I don't know of another law school that has it officially as part of their curriculum, the words emotional intelligence, but it's one of the things that if you learn, it's not a soft skill. It's not a soft skill. It's one of the most, it's emotions are the currency by which we all interact. Okay. And sometimes what happens is, as a law student, this is the thought process. You're going to be concerned about something. Okay. I don't know how to IRAC, which is issue, rule, analysis, conclusion, right? I don't know how to IRAC. Or how do I outline a case? Or how do I outline a course? What's a horn book? Oh man, everybody seems to have a horn book, but I don't know what that is. Oh my gosh, I might get called on through the Socratic method. That's never happened to me before, right? So there's all these kinds of concerns that happen in our minds, right? If there are recurring concerns, which a lot of times they are, because 95% of the thoughts that we have, of the 50 to 70,000 thoughts that we have throughout our day, are negative, and then 80 to 85% are recurring from the day before. So there's a huge carryover of negative thoughts day to day. So if you've been concerned about all those things, on a Monday, you're likely going to be concerned about those things on a Tuesday, and on a Wednesday, and then on a Thursday, and then on a Friday, and it's just going to keep going and going. But by gaining self-awareness within the context of this emotional intelligence skill, right? By gaining self-awareness and capturing those concerns, then what you do is you stop the pattern of thought, and instead you figure out a way of finding a solution for it. And I'll tell you a little bit about what some strategies are to find the solution, but let me just take you through the thought pattern. So if you allow a concern to continue for a long period of time, it's going to become a worry, right? And a worry, if you allow it to continue for a long period of time, it's going to become a stressor. Stressor for a long period of time, short period, it can help you. It can help you get it done. But for a long period of time, it's going to create anxiety. Then if you feel anxiety and stress for a long period of time, you're going to feel overwhelmed, right? And then feeling overwhelmed for a long period of time, and I have worked with some clients that have been there, will lead to hopelessness and helplessness. And unfortunately, the next step after that can potentially be suicide. All right. Us as professionals in the legal profession, we tend to be type A personalities, like you mentioned. And so we feel that if we ask for help, that we are not good enough. We're supposed to be able to do this on our own. And that is just not the truth. That's not how it works. You are not going to be any less. You're not going to be, you know, looked down upon if you ask for support, especially when it comes to your health, right? And so that's the thought process. And you're right. That is one of the reasons why we end up having some of the highest rates of alcohol use, drug, substance abuse, stress, anxiety, depression, and suicide, right? And so a lot has to start with those thought patterns, and then also understanding what emotions get created as a result of our thought pattern. Let me just ask you really quickly, Steve, like right now, what are some emotions that you're feeling? Calm, maybe?
Yeah, calm, curious, alert. Yeah.
You mentioned three, like off the bat, right? Within like 2 seconds, you mentioned three emotions. In another 5 minutes, you're going to feel a different set of emotions. And we're feeling them throughout the day based on the information that we're receiving. But we don't pay a lot of attention to those emotions. If we do, then that's when we're able to catch a lot of those concerns, a lot of those worries, and then turn things around, right? Okay, so oh man, everybody's talking about Hornbooks. I don't know what Hornbooks are. I don't know who to ask. I'm kind of concerned about that. I'm getting worried because it's like middle of the semester. Okay, well, it's becoming a worry. So first, write down what the exact worry is that you have. Just write it down and see it, you know? And then two, then ask yourself, is there something that you can do about it, right? If there is, then write down what are the things that you can do, right? And then three, pick one of those three things that you wrote down to move forward with. Okay, I'm going to select option three. And then the fourth part is from that option that you selected, what's one step that you're going to take, one small step every day to move that option that you selected forward. And so then it moves you from a place of thought to action. And when we start acting and we start making progress, then our attention shifts to getting that goal done. And we start feeling, okay, a little bit better. One of the more powerful things to counter stress, anxiety, which can, you know, stress a lot of times, or fear even, right? We think of fear as the common saying is fight or flight, right? But a more common one is freeze. Mm-hmm. Fear a lot of times causes us to freeze, and that's procrastination. And the best way to counter that is to make small, smart, steady steps. Just progress a little bit per day. Does that make sense?
Love it. Yeah. Thought to action. I think putting things into practice and getting yourself moving can help you break out of those loops or cycles that we so often fall into.
And I've worked with clients that took the bar, that failed it several times, right? And it's hard to get back into it again. It's hard, because, oh man, like I have to do all this studying again. And so what I'm very sharp about is reading where the person is in terms of how much can you put in right now. And we can't start with like 50 questions because where you are, where your mindset is, we need to ease into it. So let's start with 10 questions a day, 15 questions a day. And by the end, we're doing 80, 90, 100 a day, right? But we have to start slowly and ease into it to allow the mind, the body, the spirit to adjust.
Yeah, it's a transition period, embarking on something new like exam prep. And I was really pleasantly surprised to learn that we're of like minds on this, that we both focus on helping students create study plans, game plans, breaking it down step by step to help them through their entire study journeys. Before we wrap up, could you just share a little bit about your bar exam offerings and the game plan that you offer students?
Definitely. So one of the things that like I mentioned is really important before you go in is look, we don't all have the same level of comfort. The bar exam, there's three parts. The first one is MBEs, which are the multiple choice part. Then there's written essays. And then there's a third part called the performance test, where you're literally given an assignment. It's like a mock assignment from a senior attorney or the head of a corporation, and you're given an assignment and you have 90 minutes to 3 hours to complete it. And you have to write a memorandum. Okay. The first two parts, the multiple choice and the essays, those require a lot of memorization of like 15, 16, 17 subjects. That's one of the things that makes it really intense, that you have to memorize a lot of information. The third part doesn't require any memorization. It just requires you to write effectively and write in a specific manner, right? Same thing with the essays. Issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. You have to write in that form, in that format, right? And so what I do is I help my clients have a plan of attack for each part of those, each part of the exam, right? And make sure that they know what to do. And if they know the law, how to, in the essays, express that clearly, right? And concisely, and then making sure that their analysis within the analysis portion of the IRAC is clear, it's to the point, it's effective. And then also, what about when you don't know the rule or you don't know this question? There's going to be that situation. What's going to be your plan in terms of managing the stress under that? And what's going to be your plan of attack to that particular question? You have to know what you're going to do, because you don't have time to figure it out once you start really getting, into the study mode, and you don't have time to figure it out in the actual exam. You have to, it has to be instinctual, right? So just to give you an example, like for the multiple choice, the second time around, I didn't do this, but I had my predetermined question for those questions that I knew I wasn't going to know. And I didn't waste time. I was like, I read this 2 times. I absolutely have no idea. Here's my letter C. Let's keep moving forward, because I have questions that I need to get right, and I have to keep things moving. And I'll come back to it at the end, because I was able to save some time. You know what I mean? And so the program really focuses on giving you a plan of attack for each of the 3 parts, but then also what's going to be your game plan in terms of managing stress and developing a passing mindset, and then also what's going to be your game plan for purposes of preparation. So I help my clients figure out, if you have a calendar through your big bar prep, take a look at it closely. Are there certain days where maybe you know a subject really well, but you don't know another one very well? You have to adjust things a little bit. Or if it's someone who's a repeat bar taker and they don't have a calendar, I work with them on creating one day to day, because that's what I had to do the second time around. I had to literally work on creating a calendar. What was I going to do in the first 3 hours of my day, the second 3 hours of my day in the middle, and then the 3 evening hours of my day? And I had to know exactly what I was going to do, how many essays, how many outlines I was going to write, how many multiple choice, how many performance tests, because that's the level of work and just forethought and planning that's required to really be able to accomplish your goal.
I love it. It sounds like you're really breaking this down, hitting it from every angle, both the practical, the test-taking strategies, as well as the emotional, to help students with whatever issues they might be facing on the exam prep. What's the best way for students to find out about the exam prep and the bar exam prep, and then, of course, your other stuff, I Matter Now, Attorney Heart?
Definitely. So if folks specifically need support in relation to bar exam preparation and, developing their own bar exam game plan, I have a book and the website's called Passing the California Bar. It's not applicable to just the California bar. I mean, this game plan, we're all going to experience stress. It applies to any student taking an exam from any jurisdiction. And so it really is, holistic and broadly applicable to any bar exam taker. And so passingthecaliforniabar.com, and my email is passingthecaliforniabar@gmail.com. And then if you just want to reach out to me, as a future attorney, and you need some support, or you're in law school and you're like, I'm going through a tough time, I'm stressing out and I need that wellness support, right? The best email is my imatternow@gmail.com. So that's IMATERNOW@gmail.com. And I did one T specifically because it's really about, it's an acronym, right? We learned IRAC in law school. I wanted to teach I Matter to professionals, right? So it's living with intention, living with motivation, living with authenticity. And then we have tips, exercises, and resources that we provide. And that's, that's what it stands for. So.
Man, I love it. It's great. I'll make sure to include links in the description below this episode. Fernando, thank you so much for joining and sharing your advice for my audience today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Awesome, Steve. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it, and keep up the great work.
Thanks. You do the same. Be well.